I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to revisit the lasagna method of dyeing yarn. Now, this might seem like a silly term, but the lasagna method was a term dubbed in chat for where I have a catering steam pan and I layer yarn and dye cold with no acid, then layer more yarn and dye and more yarn and dye to dye way more skeins of yarn in one pan than I normally can do. Now, in the past, I've done this to create multiple skeins of one type of variegated colorway. That's worked great. And then I've also done this where I've used different kinds of colors on each layer, and we got a really cool sort of variegated kind of fade set because of the way the colors sort of blended and mixed. Today we're going to do a little bit of a combination of the two. But before I talk more about the details of the colors, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Izzy. Izzy, thank you so much for being my lab partner today and for encouraging me to have some more lasagna yarn fun. It's also really funny that this technique is called lasagna because sometimes when people see pictures of my dye pots, they call it forbidden spaghetti or cursed spaghetti. And so it's all fun, but there's nothing food related here. All of the tools and equipment that I'm using are dedicated for dyeing yarn and are never used for food. And if you're interested in learning any more about any of the tools and equipment that I'm using for this project, I do have affiliate links to Amazon, Knit Picks, and a few other companies down in the video description. If you make any purchases through these links, I may earn a commission, and I have them clearly marked in the description. Let's talk about the colors we're gonna use today. Izzy encouraged me to do another Pokemon inspiration. I found that picking a family, an evolution family of Pokemon, was a really fun way for me to pick a color palette, and it was completely up to me who I picked. So I went for Noibat and Noivern. These were Pokemon I pulled originally for the Spring Mini Skein mini-series, but the palette that I sort of developed from these Pokemon felt a little bit similar to some of the other ones I used, so I hadn't used it yet. But I'm thinking I want to use this palette here and do a combination of a variegated yarn and have maybe one color that sort of repeats all the way through. And then I want to do different colors on each layer for the others. We might end up with something that blends completely and so everything's gonna look the same, or we could end up with some subtle or less subtle differences between the skeins. We won't know until we try. And now I'm gonna go pre-soak 700 grams of Knit Picks Swish DK yarn. Swish is 100% superwash merino wool, and I'm pre-soaking it for maybe an hour or so in just plain tap water, no acid. We want no acid in our dye bath because we don't want the dyes to strike quickly. We want to be able to spread them throughout each layer and then maybe some through the layers as well. And I'm gonna pre-soak the yarn for about an hour or so, and I'll also go pull our acid dye colors. My plan is to mostly do a different color on every layer of our lasagna. We're gonna have some toner black in one section across the board. And then one layer will be grays. We have tornado and platinum. Then we have our purples, electric violet and hyacinth. And then we'll move into greens, teal green and spearmint breeze. And in between layers, I might add a few pops of red because I guess I'll get into that when it's time. But I'm gonna do our first layer as a little bit of a time lapse because I think that it's a technique and we know much more about what to expect there. Since I'm dealing with dry dye powders today, I am going to be wearing my Deluxe Wrapper respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves whenever I am using the powders. I laid 200 grams of our Swish DK yarn on the bottom of the pan. And then before adding a lot more water, I did add a tiny bit of water, but I started working in our toner black, tornado gray, and platinum gray. Once I was satisfied with the coverage on one side, I flipped the yarn over, added more color and more water as needed to the other side, working it through with my gloved fingertips and wiping my gloved hands on my yarn mop and then a dry paper towel before going in for more dye powder. With the other layers that are coming, I'm not going to be able to flip it without giving too much of a reveal of what's transferring and maybe altering things. So I wanted to make sure to get really excellent coverage on this bottom layer. Phew, that was the first layer. Platinum gray both breaks and strikes really, really quickly. I see some like reds in there, which is actually fine because I'm going to be bringing in some reds before our next layer. But the tornado gray and the toner black look very, very similar right now. I promise they are different. Okay, and I'm going to pour this down at the platinum end. So there still seems to be, well, I'll pour some down here. There still seems to be a fair amount of dye in the tornado and true black that will transfer up. And so that is great. So now I want to bring in a little bit of poinsettia. And I am currently speckling this on in between the lightest and deepest color. And I'm not going to press that through until we're pressing all the colors through with our next layer. Now, the toner black, that is a color that is going to go through every layer. And so I am going to add a little bit more powder. It's hard to see to the top of the toner black area. That way there is more color that will go immediately onto our yarn. But let me grab the next 200 grams and hopefully I don't have too much dye on my gloves when I go get those out of the freezer. The first skeins as I put them on were not very wet. This time they are more wet, and I'm trying to sort of scrunch this as I lay this out. There is a little bit of red that must have been on my finger, but that's in the black section. I think we'll cover that. Now, there might be differences in how I'm leaning and layering this yarn into the pan, and that is okay. Now, I'm immediately going to start pressing through with our black because we added that dye, and oh good. That's giving some good color to the downside. We added that dye already, and I want to make sure that we work that through really, really well. Otherwise, I would not be starting here in our darkest section. So now we're going into the purples, and you can see some of those reds from the poinsettia kind of come through a little bit. I'm not entirely sure what that'll look like, but I'm excited. Now, hyacinth is a super fun color. It's one I love, but it's also one that is going to disappear a little bit once I start pressing it through. It's almost good now that we have those reds because it'll help me see where like I had placed that purple color. I'm hoping we'll be able to push that through a reasonable amount, but now we can see that little bit of poinsettia come through, and actually this is probably the first example of what's telling us what happens without us having like more water or anything in our situation. Now I have no acid in my yarn mop either, so just throwing that out there. But yeah, so if we have powder like one layer below, it will work up and work its way through. And it might also work its way down. We will see. And we'll see how that blends eventually with our greens that we're going to have on the top level of this yarn. But I knew we likely weren't going to end up with speckles, but you never know. This is electric violet. You can
see it is nearly empty. I think electric violet is now the most expensive color that Dharma has in their entire collection. I think that there's a pigment in this color that is just very, very pricey now. And I can peek down. Okay, it is going down a bit, but see, we also don't know how much we have the tornado coming up either. I will be adding some more color, I think, on the hyacinth. You saw that that kind of disappeared and then is coming back a little bit. Let's go ahead into our black. Now I am trying to be good about adding a lot of dye here. Because one note that I always have for myself when it comes to trying to do a variegated section that's black with a direct dye application is I could have added more dye. So I am trying to make this a little black hole over here. That is my goal. And I will say it is looking very, very dark. Now, as I'm pushing the colors through over here, I'm trying hard to really massage it through. But I know that there could be some areas that I'm missing, and I think I'm going to need more water for sure. Because right now all the yarn is getting really compressed. And more water, on one hand, is going to help us move our dye through, but on the other hand, it can also make things spread more. There we go. But it's funny that it still feels like a lot of that liquid, oh dear, is down at the one end and hasn't really pushed down. So I'm going to get a little more water. Well, the reason why I added it to the other end was because I didn't want to push the darks into the lighter area, but we do want to work these through. And I do think I also want to add more dye onto these areas. So that's what I'm going to do. It's so hard not knowing what's happening beneath the surface. Once again, grabbing a little bit of poinsettia, popping that in just along that line. Okay, wiping that off on the yarn mop. The yarn mop's going to have so much red compared to the other colors because that's a color that I have so much more on my fingertips as we go in. And then we're also going to add some toner black onto our black section. Tempting to get a little bit all over. Once again, I'm going to bring these in one at a time to the best of my ability, sort of helping it layer on. Definitely found some red on my fingertips that I hadn't really shuffled through. Okay, we've got our yarn on, and immediately, once again, the area where I want to press it down is with our black. Because, yes, good, it's helping us get coverage on the bottom. Now, if we had had acid in here already, it would be easier and harder in many different ways. It would be easier to keep the colors from spreading, but harder to get colors to sort of remain where I place them. All right, let's bring in this Spearmint Breeze. I wonder how much of this will go down onto the purple, how they'll combine. I haven't done this particular green, oop, that was a lot of dye, and purple before, but greens and purples can actually mix into some really stunning colors. And unlike the last time I did a different color on every layer, this one isn't immediately changing. I wonder if it's going to change what's below, because you do see some of those reds coming up. And it's possible we're getting some purples and it's going into a deeper green. But it's hard to say for sure what's happening. And that's why this is fun. We do not know. But I see a lot of those reds coming through. Let's do our teal green, which is a very pretty color. Bring it over the red. Now I definitely have some yarn scrunched up in here. And I am bringing it, there we go, down there into the interface of our sort of middle color and the black. Ooh, whatever that's doing with that red is pretty cool. I do think I will need some more water, but you see we are able to get it nice and wet and bring it down. And you know, I'm not seeing a lot of white when I move it, and so that is good. That's what I wanted to avoid if I could. Now, I don't know if I'm going to add any more red. I'm a little torn about that. Maybe I'd add a hint and like tap it in. But I don't know. In the comments, which of course this isn't a stream, but you can let me know what you would have done. Let's try to make our black black. Watch, I'm going to be like, man, I needed to add even more. But the thing about having this color that carries through the whole way is that gave me time to like keep building it. And the fact that this is so gray means that there already, before I added dye on this layer, means that there's a real good chance that we've got good coverage. Yeah, I mean, the best I can see. And we're going to need to work the colors through again when we add acid. Part of me is like, ooh, should I add more? But part of me is liking this as it is. I could have gone lighter with that spearmint. Oh man, so I think I need to let this sit for 10 minutes. Actually, you know what we'll do? Because none of the rest of it is going to end up as speckles. Added a tiny bit of the poinsettia on the top. And I'm just blending it out a little bit so it is there. Oh man, this is so fun. I don't know what it's going to look like beneath the surface, but I figure there's no harm in letting it sit for a little while before we come and add acid.
What I love right here is it very much feels like there's a new color going on here. And I do see some interesting, almost teal colors developing down there, but I don't know what's happening. It's impossible to know what's happening. But now let's start adding some acid. And so the lack of acid again, and I'm not keeping count, was our key to having these colors strike slowly enough so that way it gave us some time to spread the colors out. Okay, so now, oh, I'm also onto our yarn mop gonna add just like 2 tablespoons of vinegar right on top of it. And now we're gonna start working this through, which of course is moving those reds more. And it's funny, I'm not seeing a ton of color down at this end. There's a lot more color here in the middle. So I try to work it through, and you can see these colors spread as I push it, because we're trying to work that vinegar through the bottom. Now we will be adding a lot more water, and to do this I'm planning on adding some water with vinegar that was a pre-soak left over from another project I did today. Oh my, that was a lot of red on my hand. I squeezed the yarn mop to try to work those colors through. And then my hand looked super interesting. All right. So as I bring in this water, we are also adding more acid because there was acid in this pre-soak. And I don't want the colors to spread too much, but when we go to heat set this, I want there to be enough water so that way nothing scorches. And I do want to add the liquid mostly to that far end. But now I can come and work these colors through, and this might be pushing some other color down, but you can see that the yarn is still like on the bottom and it's still at the surface. And okay, we have a lot of black. a lot of black, but we're at better levels where I don't feel like things will dry out. Now, as for our yarn mop, who is mostly red and black, I'm gonna steam set her in a steamer basket for 30 minutes. Once one opens up, I still have some other things to heat there. And as for this, I think I might add a little bit more water, and then we're gonna take it to the stove. This is more of that water with acid. Okay. And I'm gonna keep some of this on hand should we need it. This is leave no dye baths behind. And I'm gonna take this over to the stove. Okay, we're on my stove. I have a burner here and here. It's possible everything's gonna look a little bit like this. It's possible we'll see some other colors down below. I mean, we probably will, but it's hard to say like how variegated or shifty or parrot-like. When I use a different sort of primary color family on each layer, there was a lot of blending, but a lot of like fun stuff as well. So one thing I am gonna wanna do at this stage is get some foil. I have already wiped down the edges with a wet paper towel. One of these days I'll get an actual cover, but I want to both trap liquid inside, but also by trapping the steam, we're trapping some of the heat as well. And I'm gonna reduce the heat to low. And I'm gonna heat this, I think for, I think we need to go at least 40 minutes to give it time to heat up. So I'll peek in periodically to make sure things are nice and wet, but otherwise we'll be back in about 40 minutes. It has been 40 minutes, and let's check and see. Now, ooh, I like whatever this red is doing down here. I did check after 20 minutes, and it had looked like, the best I could tell, that the water was clear. And that's the way it's looking to me as I check with a spoon. So I'm gonna turn off the heat, and we're gonna let, ooh, so much purple, and I see gray. Oh, I see different colors. Let's peek here too. Okay, I see more bright purple, and I don't know what I see down there. Wait, is that dye? No. No, that's just darkness. Ooh, I'm so excited to move this and see what we can see. But anyway, the heat is now off. I'm gonna let this cool, maybe not completely, but cool for a while, and then we'll peel back the layers to see what we've got. It's the next morning, the pan is completely cool, and I'm only back here at the stove to remove the layers. So let's do that. Okay, that's looking quite black. Let's flip it. Ooh. Okay, so on the reverse side of this, we've got some more like blue, just a couple more blue purple notes and some more of the red on that bottom layer. Ooh, a lot of the green traveled down. A lot of the spearmint traveled down and gave us like a deep teal at the end here, which is kind of fun because we have teal in the middle of the other one. Oh, that's so cool. And we still have the red because that's where we placed it. And then this is looking way deeper. And there's still a lot of purple vibes in here, more so than the previous layer. Oh, but that's kind of cool. It looks like our greens went all the way down. And oh, we do still have some gray on the other side. This layer feels with the exception of the reverse side, feels like it might be pretty similar to the middle one, but it's still really pretty. And you can see that our dye bath is completely clear. So let's go start washing the yarn. Just for giggles, I have one of the bottom layer and one of the next layer, and I think with this lighting you can't really tell, but there is a shift in more purple and green on the one in the middle. And so we're just gonna wash 3 skeins. Hopefully we aren't gonna get any bleeding. I feel like I used so much dye on the black. I really, really hope that it feels black. I will be very disappointed if after all that it feels gray, but you know, it's sort of like, okay, use as much as I think and then add more. What I am excited about so far, like maybe there's one light patch there, but that's where the light gray was. So, all right, I'm seeing like a hint of something in the water. Yeah, like a hint that maybe is from some of that black, but ultimately that's not super scary. But let's fill this back up with water. It should also be noted for the record that I do have some staining on my pan from the black, which hopefully will wash out. But okay, that, whatever I saw, is already basically resolved. I'm gonna rinse this one more time, and then I'll put this yarn through my spin dryer, and we'll wash the other 3 skeins. And I'll wash the other 3 skeins quickly, just in case there's some bleeding I don't know about, but otherwise you'll see this super, super fast. And I'll spin dry the yarn, hang it to dry, and now we can see the finished yarn. Here is all of our lasagna yarn for us to create that Noibat colorway. And we have our more gray layer followed by the more purples and then the more greens. And there are absolutely blending moments throughout. We have some hints of green all the way down on all of the yarn, and well, we did have the black. We tried to have that all the way through. I feel like the bottom layers already over there picked up more purple than the way that the purple or green were shifted from one another, but you can feel some of that teal in here with the purples. But overall, I think that this fits our Noibat and Noivern inspiration really well. One thing I'm extra excited about are how those little pops of red came in, because we didn't work them through until we were on like the next layer, and so they don't go through all the way exactly, but I think that they had a lot of fun. As for our black, except for maybe the bottommost layer on the far left, everything else feels much more charcoal gray. Yep. And we're overexposed now, but we even have some more brown and tan notes in here. I think when it comes to black, when I'm not measuring out color, I still need to add more because it looked so dark and so black. And I still added more and it still wasn't enough. Now, I am gonna leave this because I enjoy the gray notes. That's part of the colorway anyway. So I don't mind. But if I were at this point and I really wanted those ends to be black, what I would do would be to set up a kettle and dip the yarn in to absorb more color on just that end of the yarn and leave the rest of it undyed. And that's, I think, the way that I would manage adding color down there going forward. And so I could do that with, goodness, some kind of shoebox followed by steam setting, or really just set up a kettle and trying to keep the rest of the yarn out. Or even just dip dyeing and moving it, that would work as well. But overall, I am thrilled with the progression. Here is our yarn mop, and it has so much red in it compared to any of the other colors from this dyeing project because I wasn't pushing the red through, and so I had more of it to wipe onto here. And so it's just a really fun colorway, which actually does go well with the lasagna yarn still. I mean, the mop fits with everything. It's a lot lighter. It has a lot more contrast, even with those red notes being in there. But if we were doing some kind of fade with this, you could fit this in. I just think it's a bit of a larger jump from the yarn mop to, say, that lightest skein over there than maybe some of the other transitions, but it could still work. Twisted Up, I think I love this set even more. Oh, it is so fun. I love the way that the blacks, okay fine, charcoal gray and the red really pull everything together as something very consistent, but then there are these other shifts of color. This turned out so pretty. Izzy, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope that you are going to enjoy this yarn as much as I do. And if you want to learn how to become a lab partner like Izzy, head over to the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop and find the lab partner listing. And if it's not currently available, send me a message and I can add you to the waiting list, and I'll DM you once there are more lab partner slots available. Izzy, thank you again for being my lab partner. Now, my shop is also filled with a bunch of other hand-dyed yarn that has been featured in my videos and in live streams. And so it's worth checking that all out, because not only can you get some really beautiful hand-dyed yarn, you're supporting the content here at the same time. And it's just a way to help me to continue to make 2 videos a week, every single week. I think maybe there was one week once where there was only 1 video. But for years now, I've been doing 2 videos a week, and I'd like to keep that train going. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.